So we're so glad to have you here with us today. My name is Lisa Dush, and I'm an associate professor of writing, rhetoric, and discourse at DePaul University in Chicago. I'm also the faculty director of HumanitiesX, together with my colleague at HumanitiesX, Amanda Loudermilk, and Harris Kornstein from the University of Arizona. I'm excited to have everyone together here today for the second of two Teaching the Publicly Engaged Humanities to Undergraduates Summer Workshop Series sessions. So today we're going to hear from four fabulous speakers. First together presenting, we have Megan Moran and John Sobosli from Montclair State University. Then we have Carolina Vialba from Florida International University, and then Bryce Nordquist from Syracuse University. Just a little bit of background on today's event. This workshop series began in the summer of 2024, and it's co-sponsored each summer by HumanitiesX at DePaul and the Department of Public and Applied Humanities at the University of Arizona. We imagine it as a space for college and university educators, as well as community practitioners, to learn about and connect around teaching the publicly engaged humanities. HumanitiesX, as I said, is DePaul's Experiential Humanities Collaborative, and we are funded by our College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences and the Mellon Foundation, who's generously funded us since 2019. We run a fellowship program that recruits an annual cohort of faculty, community partners, and later in the fellowship students who work in small teams to develop and teach new community-engaged project-based humanities courses, which are all focused on today's most pressing challenges. And I'll ask Harris to just quickly say a few words about the program at the University of Arizona.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lisa. And on behalf of PAH, we're very pleased to co-sponsor this series. The Department of Public and Applied Humanities at the U of A was founded in 2017 and launched our BA in Applied Humanities the following year. Our undergraduate program incorporates core humanities classes with 14 emphasis areas, including topics like astrobiology, business administration, environmental systems, fashion, public health, and design thinking. We just enrolled our 400th major, and we have one of the largest internship programs at the university as well. And I also just want to highlight that PAH publishes a global public humanities newsletter, a project that we took on stewardship of from the National Humanities Alliance. And the newsletter features project news, calls for participation, and opportunities for funding and jobs and whatnot from across the US and around the world. And we have almost 2,000 subscribers and would love to have more and to have you submit your content and your wonderful projects throughout the year. So I'll put that information in the chat, and thank you again. Looking forward.
Thank you, Harris. Okay, so each of our speakers today will discuss the session theme, which is building and benefiting from collaborative infrastructures in publicly engaged humanities as it's manifested on their campus. So we're going to move from two faculty who linked courses around shared projects to a course that is hooked into the National Humanities Action Lab, to an engaged humanities network that has connected over 30 courses and 75 partner organizations over 6 years. Our speakers will discuss how these collaborative infrastructures got off the ground and how the collaborations benefited students and other stakeholders. During the first hour, we'll have 3 15-minute presentations. Then we'll do just a little bit of wrap up. And then the session will continue after a quick 3-minute break. And that's an opportunity to talk as a group with the speakers and with each other. The discussion begins with a quick brainstorming exercise to help you reflect on what you've heard today and how the ideas might apply in your own context. And then that leads us into about a 20-minute conversation with the speakers and other attendees. We hope you'll stay for that last half hour. It's a nice way to debrief and connect, and we do intend this series to be an opportunity to connect across institutions. But of course, you're welcome to drop off at the 1 hour mark as well. And then just a quick word about cameras. You can keep them on or off as our speakers talk. Slides will take up most of the screen. But during the discussion portion of the event, it'd be great if your circumstances permit, if you could have your cameras on. Okay, so let's move into our first speakers for today. So we have from Montclair State University, Megan Moran, who's an associate professor in the Department of Political Science, Law, History, and Anthropology, and John Sobosli, who is the associate professor in the Department of Global Cultural Studies. Megan and John are also co-directors of Montclair's Humanities Plus Lab, and they'll be speaking about their cross-course collaboration today. Megan and John, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you and Amanda for inviting us and having us be here. We're really thrilled to be a part of this. As Lisa noted, Megan and I are co-directors of the Humanities Plus Lab at Montclair State University. This is a very new initiative. It actually got started by an outgoing dean at the end of last year. We've since gone through an entire restructuring of our college. We have new schools, new universities. So we thought we would take you through our first attempt, really a pilot of trying to show what collaboration could be through the Humanities Plus Lab. And Megan and I did this kind of on our own with a little help from the School of Interdisciplinary Studies. And we thought, since we're really in the early stages of our collaboration, it might be useful to kind of bring you into the weeds a little bit and show you precisely what we did. So this infographic kind of gives you an overall look at where we came from, where we started with the mission of the lab, and where we ended up. Amanda, if you would advance the slide, I have a more detailed slide after that. Thank you. So what we set out to do was kind of pilot this collaboration to be a proof of concept for the lab. We wanted to connect students with humanistic study and their real world experiences. We wanted to train them in the kind of humanistic methods that we think are really beneficial. And we also wanted to train them in digital tools with community partners to kind of break down the walls of the campus. So I was teaching in a 400 level international studies seminar. Megan was teaching a new interdisciplinary studies 101 course, as well as a history seminar. And so we decided to try to work together on a project that explored migration and immigration through local eateries and local foodways. And since I was doing a more global context, I took the more zoomed out kind of macro analysis view, whereas Megan really delved into the specific stories and the specific neighborhoods of our local communities. And we hope that this way our students would connect with the lessons and the kind of research tactics that we wanted to teach them, as well as culminating in a digital project that they could use to show people what they've done and to demonstrate the kind of usefulness of these kinds of ideas. And we figured we'd center it all around food to, draw them in and make it a little bit more interesting for them. So this gives you an overarching view of the project, and I'll pass it to Megan so she can talk about our preparation and the planning process for it.
Thank you. So this just shows a little bit of some of the planning process that we went through. In the fall semester, we did a lot of the initial brainstorming of sort of what connected our courses, how we were going to connect the courses we were assigned, the International Studies Seminar, which is a 400 level course, the History Capstone, which is also a 400 level course, and then the Interdisciplinary Thinking course, which is a 100 level course. Our university launched a new School for Interdisciplinary Studies this year with a new major, and that's a foundational course for the major, and it's also a gen ed course at our university. So we had different levels of students. And the idea was that we would have our 400 level courses provide a lot of the deep context and research, and our 100 level courses would be able to draw on those and that material as part of pulling together a larger common project. And so they were 3 separate courses, and they were run on different days and at different times. But the idea was that by building a cross-course collaborative infrastructure, right, and framework that we could use, that even though these were independent courses, they would collaborate together on a common project, a common public humanities project, and that each course would bring different pieces to it, and that also a lot of this framework would also promote student collaboration as well, so that there would be more integration between the courses. One of the things that we wanted to do was to have a sort of thematic anchor so that the common project, right, each class would contribute to this larger common project. So that thematic anchor became a grant that we applied for called the Being Human Festival. People may have heard of it or even participated in it. In the United States, it's run through the National Humanities Council. And in April, essentially, the grant funds a variety of public humanities events all throughout the country. And so our theme, our proposal was between the lines, stories of taste and place, between the lines of taste and place, stories of migration and immigration in Montclair, New Jersey. And the idea was to build a technologically enhanced self-guided walking tour of Montclair neighborhoods, bringing together culinary traditions and local history. And we formed a variety of community partners throughout the fall with the Montclair History Center and the Montclair African American Heritage Foundation, AAPI New Jersey, the Center for Indigenous Justice at Montclair State. We talked to all of these community partners about the potential for collaborating should the grant come through. So that was the idea, was that each of our courses, John's course and my 400 level course, would provide a lot of the research material and context that we would use as part of the walking tour, and the 101 course would sort of put the steps of the walking tour together. So a lot of what we decided to do by about December was to put the syllabus together. And this is definitely, I'd say, where we had no problem coming up with grand visions. That part was pretty easy. The hard part was the logistics. And so when we started to put our syllabus together, we really had to think about sort of how we were going to make sure that these courses collaborated, and to scaffold the assignments so that students could build a larger project, and also scaffold and the timing of the assignments so that students would be able to use the material produced from other courses and then bring that into the next step that they were producing for the larger public project. The other unknown piece of our planning for our syllabi was the grant, which we were supposed to hear about in December. And the National Humanities Council got an unprecedented number of applications. They pushed it to January. So when we did our syllabus, we did some scaling back because we weren't sure at that point if we would get the grant. And we tried to figure out how we could do this rather than specifically taking students in as a walking tour in Montclair, how we could develop a digital walking tour. And so we tried to scale back some of the plans to make room for things that would change. And we did find out in January that we did not get the grant, so we had to sort of go with the scaled back version. But the School for Interdisciplinary Studies stepped in and said they had some money that we could use. So a lot of the larger scale community partner plans we weren't able to use as much, but we were able to produce a food tasting and oral history interview event with a local restaurant as our sort of culminating experience for our students, which was really fantastic. So each of our courses sort of went in different directions, but they came together around this common project, the Global Foodways of Montclair. So I'm going to turn it back to John to talk about what he did in his class.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, if you advance the slide, Amanda, you'll notice that there's a theme for our presentation, which is we had these great ideas and then we didn't have any support or funding, so we tried to figure out something different. But the ultimate result was something that was quite useful. So since we were thinking about a walking tour, I was intending to use story maps, ArcGIS story maps, which is a free to use, really effective technique and tool for students to connect narrative with place-based assessment. Amanda, if you would go ahead and play that video. This is just going to scroll through one of the main story maps that we made around Uncle Momo in Eau Claire, which is billed as your local neighborhood Lebanese restaurant. This is where the students would ultimately have the food tasting and the oral interview with the owner, Ali Lawasi. And what we decided to do in my class was really try to look at these local restaurants as nodes on a global stage. So each student was assigned one or two restaurants that we worked out together. They were given freedom to choose which ones they were most interested in. And then they had to research and communicate a set of analytical insights from the local context of the restaurant. Where is it actually in town? Where does the cuisine derive from? What are the relevant informations that come from the About Us section of the website? They also looked at ingredient pathways, like where do the main ingredients in these cuisines come from? Are there vulnerabilities or potential vulnerabilities in the production process due to climate change, labor needs, political upheaval? It actually ended up being a really great joint learning lesson. I learned a lot about food production in the US that I didn't know before. So it was this interesting way that we were all kind of learning together. And since part of our weekly class was the discussion of current events, we also looked at trades and tariffs. Tariffs were very big at the time. The students were able to think of what these tariffs actually meant for local businesses as well as for the foods that they were eating. And it allowed us to connect issues of local ingredient purveyors to World War II and the UN and preferential trade agreements. And it really became this window to explore these much larger macro processes that gave the students a sense of where their community fits in the larger world. And the last thing that we asked them to research was the specific context of migration and immigration in northern New Jersey. Montclair is northern New Jersey. We're about 10 miles south of New York City. And the immigrant communities of Montclair have a history themselves. So they were able to research these particular cultural enclaves and deal with issues of cultural authenticity with these kind of movements of people, which I'll talk a little bit more about. So the story maps was what I was going to contribute to these walking tours, and Megan was the one who was dealing with the actual creation of the digital walking tours in Clio. And Amanda, you can advance the slide. Megan, you can talk about that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, John, and thanks, Amanda. So we use the oh, yep, that's it. Perfect. And if you don't mind just clicking on the actual tour itself while I talk, we could just see kind of what it looks like. Thank you so much. So yeah, we used a free digital app called the Clio.com. Clio was developed by a historian, which I heard was somebody who actually has previously spoken in this workshop, which is awesome, and developed a free app that connects to Google Maps and essentially creates a walking tour, a driving tour, heritage trails. And it's incredibly user friendly, which was wonderful for my one-on-one students. It has a template that they're able to put together. And we created 2 class entries first before they each did their own entry on the tour. My history capstone course we used the Clio entries in all of my courses last spring. My History 400 capstone course created a historical walking tour looking specifically at immigration history through family history and the families that used to live in Montclair between about 1880 and 1920. And so you can, that's not up here, but if you explore Clio, you can see those ones as well. And then my 101 students built a digital food tour looking at the stories of local restaurants in the community. And we used the story map materials that John produced, that John's class produced. So his came in right around spring break. And then as we came back, we looked at a lot of those materials and we started building out the food tour in the second half of the semester. And so we looked, for instance, at the Uncle Momo was the class entry that we put together. We all looked at the story map that John's class produced. We also looked at local newspapers to learn about the story of the owner and the restaurant, about foodways, and then we did extra research as well. We really focused on local stories and the local community, and then branched out into global networks. And so that was one way that our 101 class was able to integrate the material that John's 400 level class produced. And so we created this class entry together, and then we also each student had to do their own entry. And then what happens is it essentially all connects onto Google Maps, and you can it'll take you down. You just, as a class, create it as a walking tour in different ways. So, and it's nice. It has an introduction. It has a backstory. There's place for links and sources. And so you can include lots of different multimedia materials in the Clio as well. And we did, one in particular was by Nicolo's Bakery. That was one we did that brought in some of the material from the history class. We looked at city directories on the Montclair Public Library website to understand Italian immigration in the area. And the family that still owns Nicolo's Bakery today was an immigrant family that came to Montclair. And so we learned a lot about sort of the what's called the Pine Street Historic District in Montclair. And then we also we did a lot of ways in which students were able to build their own. The Uncle Momo entry in particular was the big one that we worked together as a class, because we also were able to use the funding from the School for Interdisciplinary Studies to go and do an oral history interview. And that's another thing. And Amanda, if you don't mind advancing the slide one more. Thank you. That was one of the really culminating experiences for my students. They absolutely loved it. So it was a food tasting experience. We were able to use the money to pay for transportation, which is not far. It's a good, just maybe 10, 12 minutes from campus, and as well as the food itself. And students were able to try food from the Uncle Momo's restaurant is Lebanese French bistro. The owner is also from Morocco, so there's a real mix of cultures and food influences. For some students, this was a chance to sort of showcase food that they knew, and for others, it was a chance to try food they never had before. And they absolutely loved it. We also practiced oral history interview techniques in our course. They listened to oral histories, like the Southern Foodways Alliance has oral histories of restaurants and ethnic grocery stores. They also practiced on some oral history interviews with their families, and then they spent a lot of time thinking about what kinds of questions they wanted to ask. And they ran the entire interview. They asked, so the owner came and sat with us, and while we ate, and the students asked a lot of questions, and it was really fantastic. Amanda, if you could just play like 25 seconds of the video just to give you a sense.
Well, all my ingredients, to tell you, is imported from Middle East. I deal with a company in Patterson. So all the sumac, the tahini, all the stuff, I pay hard for that money. It's good, yes. Yes, so I have a very good quality for all the spices, all the stuff that is Middle Eastern spices, 100%. Even the chickpeas, the hummus, I'm very, yes, to get this.
Okay, if you don't mind pausing.
The chickpeas.
Amanda, thank you so much. Sorry, we don't have a lot of time, so I just wanted to stop it, but so you could get a sense of it. But we went during my class time period, so my students were able to go, and we were supposed to just go for about the hour and a half that was our class time frame. They stayed for 3 hours. They had so much fun. So I'll let John take it over from here.
You can advance the slide from the last slide, Amanda. Thank you. So we actually gave, in our Leave Behind document, we gave links to the audio recordings. We gave links to the walking tour, so you can all see that. I think the success of the project was relevant in many ways. The audio interview and the tasting was by far the most interesting, but the way students learned to apply different levels of analysis to a common topic was also really beneficial. And they were creative in not having to turn in a paper or a presentation, but use these new digital tools in kind of a different way that they can also share with people in hopes of, also encouraging people to understand what they're doing and maybe getting more students into the kinds of courses that we were teaching. Just like with this presentation, I think Megan and I learned that we needed more time. The biggest thing that we needed was more time for planning, more time for logistics, more time for communication. About 75% of our students are commuters and 50% work more than 20 hours a week. So trying to get them organized into a visit was really tricky. So greater time given to the research guidance, as well as discussions around things like what makes an ethnic food restaurant, what makes authenticity, how are those things derived? I think that was really where I took it. And Megan and I have grand dreams of integrating our classes even more, engaging with our partners even more, bringing everything together into a single space. And that's kind of where we're hoping to go with the lessons that we've learned from this. So we're out of time, so I'll end it there. And Megan, you can have the last word if you like.
I'll end it there since we're done as well. I think John encapsulated it really well. Our biggest lessons learned was timing in terms of planning, but we've got a lot of new ideas going forward for how to bring our students into even more integration. We learned a lot about how to create a cross-course collaborative framework, and we're excited to try it again.
And we'd love to talk to more people. Please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to brainstorm with everybody. Thank you for
taking that. Thank you.
Thank you both. So I'm excited about that one because cross-course collaborations is one of the most institutionally viable ways of getting things off the ground. But as you've indicated, they need resources too. So, okay, great. So our next speaker is Carolina Villalba, who is the associate teaching professor of writing and rhetoric in the Department of English at Florida International University. Carolina is also a faculty affiliate in FIU's Public Humanities Lab. And Carolina is going to talk about her course's partnership with the National Humanities Action Lab. Carolina, take it away.
Thank you, Lisa. And thanks, John and Megan, for sharing that inspiring project. That's really wonderful to hear more about it. So hi, everybody. I'm Carolina. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to say a quick thank you to Lisa, Amanda, and the HumanitiesX team for organizing this panel and workshop. And also a grateful shout out to my local colleagues from FIU for being here and for your support. So let me start out looking at my first slide here by giving you all a quick preview. My goal for today is to present a case study of a course and student projects that I recently designed that I think show possibilities for engagement beyond the classroom. On the right, in this slide, you can see a preview of my students' final project promo pamphlet, for the record, Immigration Activism in Florida. Our project took South Florida and our university, FIU specifically, as a launching point for exploring stories of activism around immigration. If you scan the little QR codes on the screen right now, you can learn more about our community partners who we collaborated with on the project and about the translocal project that our work participates in. But I'll say more about it also in a second. So to go over the presentation flow, I'll first orient you on the translocal or the national partnership that the course was built on and how our local Florida story fits within that context. Then I'll say more about how the project aims to align with both the national partnership and within the framework of my community writing course outcomes at FIU. Third, I'll review what it was like to develop and evolve the project with my students during the semester and what were some of the challenges we faced while working collaboratively. Next, I'll share some of our process for preparing to share and showcase the students' work to multiple audiences. And lastly, we'll go over some takeaways and what can be carried over as we consider designing collaborative projects like this one in our own contexts. Next slide, please. So first, let me give you some background about our project and the larger conversation that it seeks to participate in. So I first got connected with the Humanities Action Lab, which I'll refer to as HAL from now on, about 10 years ago, when I was finishing my doctorate in English at the University of Miami and writing my dissertation on carceral literature and the prison industrial complex. In 2015-2016, HAL began the translocal project and exhibition States of Incarceration, which seeks to bring together local stories about U.S. imprisonment in the form of a comprehensive website, a traveling physical exhibit, which you're seeing some parts of here in the photos, and translocal community programming. In each participating state, a university partner and a nonprofit community partner collaborate on a project that highlights a local story about imprisonment or incarceration. So for the original 2016 Florida contribution to the project/exhibit, I worked with my students at UM on a local project around the Chrome North Processing Center in Miami, Florida. For those here who are unfamiliar, Chrome is the largest and first of its kind immigration processing and detention facility in South Florida, established in 1980 to house the large influx of migrants arriving to Miami from Haiti and Cuba in the early 80s. In 2015, my students did volunteer visitation at Chrome with the nonprofit organization Friends of Miami-Dade Detainees, something that is impossible to do today. And they wrote reflections about their experiences speaking to and spending time with the men housed there at the time. The students at UM also got to take advantage of UM's vast archival materials on Chrome, which are generally not accessible to the general public. And they selected key materials for the exhibition, and they wrote accompanying text to help public audiences outside of South Florida understand the context of the material. Our Florida chapter of the original SOI was titled Crimmigration at Chrome, Processing Center or Prison, ? And you can see here on the right what the panel contribution to the physical traveling exhibition looks like. I took these photos myself this past spring when I visited the exhibit after 10 years at Hunter College, CUNY in New York City, which is now HAL's host university. So fast forward now 10 years, I now work as an associate teaching professor of English at FIU, which by the way is also my home university, my alma mater, where I got my bachelor's in English, my bachelor's in journalism, and my master's in English. So as a full-time faculty member in the English department at FIU, I reconnected with the HAL team in fall of last year as they started to consider expanding the SOI project into like a 2.0 version. And that version would also include stories about immigration detention. Since our original project contribution here in Florida focused on an immigration detention facility, it seemed like a natural follow-up to continue with a project that highlighted how the conversation around Chrome has evolved in the last decade. So on the bottom left side of this slide, you can see me with some students in my spring 2026 Writing, Rhetoric, and Community class at FIU after we spoke virtually with HAL co-director Liz Sevchenko. And this group of students now took on the 2.0 contribution to the project, which I'll speak at length on now. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the next few sections, I'm going to describe the before, during, and after of this project to give you all a sense of the scope of planning and work involved. So here, you're going to see my Venn diagram attempt to piece together the overlapping goals and process of our university community partnership. On the left side, you can see the work that I did with our translocal partner, HAL. So like contextualizing our local story within the scope of the national project, negotiating what kinds of student contributions are possible or even ethical with a project like this, and also listening a lot to the other university community partner teams when we would meet on Zoom. So as to get educated about the broader context and the bigger conversation that our project would stand alongside of. On the right side of my diagram, you can see that I go over the work I did with our local partner in Miami, which was Florida Immigrant Coalition. I'll refer to them as FLIC. I had worked with FLIC last year, in 2025, a year before, on a different set of projects for the same course, Writing, Rhetoric, and Community. This is a course that's offered a few times a year in our department. So I reached out to them again before this semester, the spring semester started, to see if they'd be interested in collaborating on this project. And let me pause here and say that I do think that this speaks to the value of having programmatic and departmental support at my institution to do this kind of community writing pedagogy with local partners involved. Since I had worked with FLIC before, we had established a foundation for collaboration already, and that really eased the way for a second partnership. So with Flick, as you're seeing on the right side of the screen, I spent some time before the semester started talking over possibilities for the student work. And importantly, listening to members of their team share about like what specific communications needs they had at the moment that student work could help begin to fill. Those initial ideas, of course, had to evolve throughout the semester. So it was really important for us to hold regular check-ins, like through Zoom, with the Flick team, and also my partner at Flick, Javier del Castillo. So we could stay on the same page about the student work, and the project could evolve naturally. And in the center, of course, I placed my department and my program, the English department, writing and rhetoric in the English department at FIU, which enables me to teach a course that allows for this kind of project because it aligns well with the goals of our community writing pedagogy, which aims to help students practice collaborative communication and project-based learning in like real world and community-based contexts. I think one of the most important objectives I had to keep in mind as I was planning the project and the semester's work was that these things all had to align with our department and our program's course outcomes for community writing, which I think the course and project more than did. Next slide, please. Thank you. So that was the before. Now, let me say something more about our process during the semester. Okay, so once the spring 2026 semester started, I had to find ways to get the students actively engaged so they could learn and develop confidence on their own throughout the process. So during the semester, I leaned hard into assignments and activities that, number one, built a framework for their collaboration that would center writing. And number two, assignments and activities that would also strengthen teamwork, community building among the students and the class, and the elements of project-based learning that they were practicing. So that meant, as I have here on the list, doing things like surveying students from the beginning for the first few weeks to get a sense of how they each wanted to contribute to the teamwork and when they were even available to meet with peers outside of class, because we too have a high commuter student population and students are not always available or can't always coordinate schedules. So that was a big component in my organizing the teams. When can they meet? What are they interested? How are they interested in participating? Okay, but it also meant like once the teamwork was kind of organized that way, then doing like low stakes, fun team building games and activities in class, like the popsicle challenge. You can ask me about that later if you want to know more details about that. But ultimately, students worked on both a midterm and a final project for the course and for our partners. They researched and wrote original research reports for Flick to document the history of local activism around the Chrome North in the past year. And for their final project, they conducted oral histories with local activists in the university and South Florida communities. So for each project, we had to negotiate. And then at times when things weren't working, we had to renegotiate equitable work distribution in the teams to make sure each student had a role and a set of tasks that they were contributing to the team. For the midterm, where students worked on the research reports about local immigration activism, each team member had a role with a specific set of tasks attached to that role, and I listed them here. So in each team we had a senior editor, a managing editor, an organizing editor, and a creative director. And each of those roles had a set of responsibilities attached to it so that everybody felt that they were contributing something unique but also equitable to the team. And then for the final, where the student teams conducted oral histories with local activists, each team was organized into two sub-teams. One that was dedicated to interviewing and one that was dedicated to transcribing and organizing the files for the final folder. This helped a lot with scheduling as well because we had to honor the scheduling needs of our narrators who were local activists. And so not all the students could always coordinate their schedules at the same time that the narrators were available. So it helped to break up the teams into two sub-teams in that way. Okay. And then lastly here, in order for our process in the class to really uphold the tenets of project-based learning and community writing, I also had to ensure that we were regularly getting feedback from multiple avenues outside the class. Okay, so this helped reinforce for us all that this was ultimately work that was being prepared for both local South Florida audiences and those in the broader US. So we had a couple of partner check-ins where the team from HAL and from Flick visited via Zoom, listened to students' ongoing work and gave them feedback on their process. And then as I'll show in just a minute, we also prepped the project to present them for different public audiences. So students got feedback and questions there in those venues as well. Next slide, please, Amanda. Okay, so quickly, a huge part of my teaching practices around community-based writing involves rhetorical and active listening as a cornerstone of effective communication. Active listening practices are super important when collaborating with community partners, and especially when we're conducting culturally sensitive primary research like oral histories. But unfortunately, I feel that listening is not a communications practice that's often stressed in writing courses. So in this course, reading, reflecting on, and talking about listening was something we did almost every week. And I was really pleased to see that many of the students wrote in their end of term reflections that learning about listening actively was one of the most memorable lessons for the course for them. So I won't read all of them to you, but here are some ways here on the slide that listening practice was a cornerstone of our course and something that I made sure to build into the students' weekly work and major projects. Next slide, Amanda, please. Okay, thank you. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that in working on a project of this scope and in collaborating this closely with partners outside one's institution, there are a number of challenges and ethical considerations to keep in mind. I confronted all of these listed here on this slide while working on this project, so I wanted to frame them as questions that I feel it's natural to ask ourselves, and it's actually responsible to ask ourselves before, during, or even after undertaking a collaborative project of this sort. And I'm moving quickly through the slide, but I just want to highlight the last couple questions on each side and challenges to consider. It's really important in that last question, who will the professor and students turn to for professional support? This kind of work, these kinds of projects are extremely rewarding, but they're also draining. And it really helps to have a buddy, have colleagues who do similar work, and have a foundation of collegiality or programmatic support where you can talk about the projects. That really helps in our department. And then on the ethical matters side, it's also really important when dealing with sensitive subject matters and vulnerable populations and sharing their stories. My last two questions, how must ethical storytelling be practiced, was something that we confronted in this class and in this project. And lastly, why might some forms of storytelling be harmful? That was a big question and ethical consideration for us that actually caused us to pivot a little bit in the oral histories. And I can say more about that if you're interested later on. Next slide, please. So after the projects were completed and the partners had offered their final round of feedback, it was time to help my students prepare to present their work to the multiple audiences that it was meant to serve. So here you can see some happy photos of those events where my students shared and showcased their work. So first in April, so you're seeing on the left-hand side of the slide, first in April at FIU, at our semi-annual community writing showcase that brings together all the courses in our department that engage in community-based writing for an audience of university members and local partners. And this is what I mean when I say like it really helps to have the foundation of institutional or programmatic support. We have a twice yearly community writing showcase where all of our students who are doing community writing classes or projects can share and celebrate their work, and then community, not only members of the university community, but also our local partners come and see the vast array of projects. So that's really nice. And then as you're seeing on the right hand of the slide, in May at Hunter College, CUNY in New York City, where two students from our class accompanied me to give a presentation on our work at the HAL convening of all the university community partners that were involved in this current leg of the project. Next slide, please. So at last, some takeaways and lessons learned from this project. And then this also doubles as a list of why, although challenging, I think this kind of course, this kind of engaged pedagogy can be so rewarding for both educators and students. So as I listed here, community-based writing inside the classroom that's rooted in engaged partnership outside the class can do things like empower students to serve multiple audiences with their communication. Introduce them, like I was saying, to challenges often confronted in public storytelling and collaborative writing. Enable them to practice negotiating ethical considerations. And then really importantly, those last 2 points can show them both the value and the transferability, I think, of the humanities and the power of effective storytelling in public spheres. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for being here and for listening. And a quick thank you also to my home institution, FIU English Department, and the support that we get from the Public Humanities Lab at FIU, and of course my partners HAL and Flick, and thank you HumanitiesX. And just one last point that I want to make is that HAL is currently accepting applications for the next cohort, the next iteration of the project. And so I'm going to drop in the chat the links to their frequently asked questions for the project and application, and also a link to the application itself. So if anyone wants to chat about it, have any questions about it, or if you're interested in joining the cohort, please email me or reach out. I'd love to talk more about it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Carolina. That was great. So much resonates with me about HumanitiesX practices as well, too. It's really useful. Okay, great. So moving along, our last and final speaker is Bryce Nordquist, who is an associate professor of writing and rhetoric and the Arts and Sciences Dean's Professor of Community Engagement at Syracuse University. He's also the founding director of the Engaged Humanities Network in Syracuse, which he'll be speaking about today. Bryce.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. And yes, thanks to Lisa and Amanda for the expert coordination, and Harris also for sponsoring. These were fantastic presentations. So thank you so much, Megan and John and Carolina. It was such rich courses with so many layers and such complexity. I know we could spend all day talking about these brilliant projects. A couple of things that I love about all this work is Megan and John, I really love the ways that the funding at this moment didn't stop you from pursuing these linked courses and collaborating across courses, and sort of the flexibility in finding ways to support the work that you're pursuing. And no doubt it will be supported in the future. It's such a good model. And Carolina, I love that the course that you've built and are continuing to build emerges from long relationships over time at different points of your own career and of your life in and out of academic institutions. So these are great, another great model and things that really fit with, I think, the way I want to zoom out today. So as Lisa said, I'm the director of the Engaged Humanities Network at SU, and I want to zoom out to think about beyond kind of individual courses, these larger ecosystems of community engaged research, teaching, creative work, programming, in the ways that courses could be integrated within these larger systems. So I'll start with this broader picture of the Engaged Humanities Network, and then I want to zoom into a project within the network called the Environmental Storytelling Central New York. So I'll describe that project, and then I want to zoom further down into the kinds of courses, teaching practices, student projects that emerge from that infrastructure. So these different layers of infrastructure. And I want to ultimately make a case that community engaged teaching, at least the ways that I've seen it play out at Syracuse and across our city and region, it tends to be more sustainable, more kind of impactful or effective or responsive to local communities, maybe is a better way of saying it, when it's integrated within these kinds of systems of research, teaching, creative work, everyday life, work within community. I've worked with a lot of instructors that have developed community engaged courses, and I'll talk a bit about that. And those courses start from many different kinds of places, but the ones that tend to start from relationships that are in place and projects that are already sort of moving forward tend to be the ones that are sustained. Not that others don't, but so that's kind of the overview. First, just a quick introduction of the Engaged Humanities Network, and then I'll get into it more. Engaged Humanities Network is a hub of community engaged research, teaching, creative work that involves faculty, students, staff from all schools and colleges at Syracuse University by now, except for one, which I won't name, which school is the holdout, and dozens and dozens of organizations across the city of Syracuse and the region. So it's pretty place-based. We do have projects that are working with communities in Japan and Alaska or other places across the world, but for the most part, this is a cluster of projects and collaborators that are local to Central New York, and I'll get into it in a bit. So Amanda, if you want to go to the next slide. First, I just want to think about some framing, and this is framing that I've used in my work for so long, but I keep coming back to as a way of thinking about this distinction between a kind of status quo educational approach and these larger kind of systems of democratic distributed education. modern institutions, I'm like preaching to the choir on this call, you don't need me to tell you, are very good at creating containers. And of course, if you're an administrator like I am, you're also good at creating containers and also boundarying those containers. So I'm not pointing any fingers here, but I think our default sort of way of thinking about education is sort of containerized, so that in these containers, and what Tim Ingalls calls a kind of logic of conversion or inversion, sort of the pathways along which our lives are lived are converted or transformed into boundaries. And so this is a kind of like a predominant modern conceit. So the kind of way that the default way of thinking about education, at least in my mind, is by semester, by grant cycle, by department, by course, stage of life or stage of a career. And so to make a shift to sort of thinking about broader educational networks is sort of what I'm interested in, and what the Engaged Humanities has been trying to build. And I know many of you on the call are also building these kinds of broader networks of mutual support. So rather than thinking of educational spaces as containers, Ingold thinks of places as junctures. And so we're also thinking of places as sort of junctures or knots of circulation, people moving texts, ideas, people circulating through these kinds of dense junctures of kind of mutual participation or meeting in place. So I'm thinking of courses like this as well. So they're products of interrelations, they're always under construction, and the larger system emerges as courses, projects, programs are connected by these movements of people, ideas, text. So this is the kind of move I want to make. And of course, it's following democratic educators like Bell Hooks or Paulo Freire or Miles Horton, who refuse a kind of separation between education and the real world, or our lives and work within classrooms and our lives of work outside of classrooms, and of course our students' lives as well. So if we can move to the next slide, the Engaged Humanities Network is trying to sort of model this broader sort of system. Which, as you can see, there are all kinds of containers on this terrible Canva mind map that I currently have an architecture undergraduate research assistant revising. But for now, we've got all these boxes because it's actually very hard to label pathways in a knot. So we have to separate them sometimes. An Engaged Humanities Network is structured by core programs that are all based on cohort models. So we have engaged courses cohorts where instructors are working with community partners to develop community engaged courses. We have undergraduate research assistants who are embedded within community engaged projects, who often come through engaged courses into those assistantships. We have engaged communities projects that are creative projects, and research community-centered research projects that involve faculty from all across the university, but also community partners from across the city and region. We have undergraduate programming, graduate programming, graduate fellowships, public scholarship certificates. The program that I want to focus on is one of these kind of EHN externally funded, but also funded from many different sources over time and differently funded at different periods. So I want to focus on environmental storytelling. But this looks like a kind of discrete, broad network of kind of programming and projects and courses. But really, if you like followed the movements of people and ideas and texts and projects that circulate across this network, you would see something more like the kind of Ingold knot that is represented on the previous slide. These are all interconnected. So we can move forward, and I'll try to get quickly through it. Yeah, thanks. So over 6 years, so since 2020, the Engaged Humanities Network has supported or is supporting currently 55 active projects. These projects come in through grants, small grants that are for projects that have to be co-designed with community partners. So nobody's entering the network without a collaborative partnership and a project that is emerging from that partnership. mentorship. The same with courses. So over the 6 years, we've helped revise or create 30 courses across 16 different departments. And again, faculty who are or instructors who are bringing these courses have to be sort of creating them with community collaborators or designing them to one degree or another. There are over 400 faculty, staff, and students involved in associated projects, courses, assistantships, and such across the network. And we have well over 75 community-based organizations that we're doing this infrastructural work with. Final slide of this section. Thanks, Amanda. This is just a summary slide. We think of this, we write about it and think of it and talk about it as a distributed system of democratic education. So this effort and these projects, courses are community-centered. They're decentralized, so it's not like, as the director of the Engaged Humanities Network, I'm kind of calling the shots across, projects that are well beyond my level of expertise or responsibility, but we are cohering them and creating spaces to sort of provide mutual awareness and mutual support across project teams and cohorts. We're helping them logistically in terms of scheduling and arranging for transportation and getting people paid, and we're also forming these cohorts so that they can exchange ideas and resources and collectively problem solve. So over each year, as projects sustain and courses regularize, the network just sort of grows organically. We are invested in mutual support. So to Carolina's excellent point about the sustainability of this work depending upon the colleagues, the professional support and systems that you're working within. This is what we're trying to build across a kind of containerized system, a kind of a network of mutual support. The projects and courses and programs we're running are intergenerational. So this is, Syracuse University is a pretty traditionally 18 to 22-year-old campus, which is something I really missed always coming through public education and public schools was the sort of intergenerational opportunities. So a lot of the projects and educational opportunities we're building are getting youth connected to elders and young adults connected to people across different communities, and we can talk more about that. And our goal is social and institutional transformation. I think a lot of times colleagues here think of this work as primarily oriented toward the transformation of the communities we're working with, but it is as much, if not more, about transforming our institution by tracing different kinds of shapes across it and building different kinds of opportunity for collaboration and valuing knowledge beyond academic institutions. So I've got the 5-minute note and we can move on to environmental storytelling. Good. So environmental storytelling is a kind of infrastructure within this infrastructure. So this is a project that we started in 2022. So we're in our 4th year with a College of Environmental Science and Forestry, SUNY ESF, which shares our campus. So we have colleagues in their writing program and also colleagues in their environmental studies program who collaborate with the Engaged Humanities Network and associated faculty and students and community collaborators in this broader structure. So I can put the link in the chat so you can check out the website in the future. But if you want to move forward from this slide, Amanda, thank you. So the model of environmental storytelling, CNY, is sort of multi-part. We have public events and workshops with featured storytellers, everything from poet laureates, who you can see here in this tiny workshop, Juan Felipe Herrera, to local farmers and local reproductive rights advocates. So our storytellers span a broad range. And we do public events where they kind of lead environmental storytelling sessions under a larger theme. We create learning guides that circulate across libraries, community centers, college courses, high school courses that engage people with that theme and then generate different kinds of activities or question prompts for them. We tell community stories about local organizations. So we produce multimedia stories on local organizations that are engaged in the different kinds of environmental justice efforts that we're featuring in the series. And then we have all this work integrated into different courses and youth programs across the city and region. So you get some photos there of an awesome program called Write Out, where people are engaging with environmental storytelling to create their own poetry. So you can flip past this slide. I think what I have now are some photos. So I want to talk in the next 2.5 minutes about the ways that courses, and including my teaching, is integrated within this broader project. So and keep in mind that this is one project within a kind of system of projects where other courses and other kinds of opportunities beyond formal education are generated through this kind of sustained collaborative project. So a couple of things I want to highlight in I regularly teach a course called Writing and the Environment. So this is a course that often I connect, or most always connect, to the environmental storytelling series. Projects within that course, which you can see examples of in the takeaway folder that I gave to folks here, are based on the learning guide. So I find that these learning guides, which are kind of a mix between like a book club, a library guide, and like a Kettering Foundation, like community discussion guide. We've kind of blended that genre, but I find it's a really excellent genre for collaborative work, the kind of team-based work that Carolina was highlighting so well, so that students are taking up different projects within the kind of composition of those learning guides based on the theme that we're taking up in the environmental storytelling series on any given term or any given semester. So on the left here, your left, this is a local elementary school that has a community garden called Helping Hands Garden, and Mike Adkins there that's showing our class, but also learners from across the community and community organizers and collaborators, their hydroponic growing setup. And so Mike was one of our featured storytellers. One thing I want to highlight about this is this series and the structure gives us a way to combine collaborators, so that we're pursuing that kind of intergenerational learning that I mentioned earlier. On the right, this is an organization called Deaf New Americans Advocacy Inc. at their farm, Ashalea Farm. So Manu Chetri here is signing, and she is one of the featured storytellers. And so we've done this kind of class trip to Ashalea, and students have produced community stories about that organization and farm. So you can move to my last slide, and then I'll wrap up for questions. So these are just more examples. So I teach a course called Writing and Photography. So this is our class going and teaching photography at local centers across the Syracuse Parks and Rec. So these are elementary school kids that we're working with, and then the elementary kids enrolled in this program are producing community stories based on environmental issues in their neighborhoods. And then the final image that I have is about the undergraduate research that comes out of these courses. So this is an earth and environmental science and civil engineering class and student who's working with a professor to measure groundwater quality in the valley of Syracuse, the south of Syracuse, based on a demolition of a local highway. So you kind of see the kind of nesting and interconnection that I'm trying to get at. Hopefully I give you, I know it's a quick overview and not super detailed on any course, but as I said, the materials that I put in the folders kind of give you more of syllabi and assignment prompts and such, but hopefully that gives a broad enough overview. And I know I'm a 1 minute over, so I'll now stop talking.
Thank you, Bryce. Okay, well, thank you so much to all of our presenters today. There's a lot of territory covered and a lot of really inspiring work. So just everybody's mentioned some things they put in folders or leave behinds. We've asked all the presenters to share something that would be useful for the audience from their work, which we consolidate into a full Google folder that we'll send out to you in the next few weeks, along with a recording of the presentation session. And then what we have next is basically we'd like to just take a 3-minute break or so you can stretch and turn your camera off, and then come back together. And we just have a prompt for you, but you can also just kind of use a minute or two to develop your thoughts about any questions that you might have had. And we'll just have a smaller group conversation amongst those of you who are interested in talking with our presenters and chatting with each other for the next half hour or so. So we'll turn off our cameras. Thank you for coming. Those of you who are going to leave at this point, those of you who want to stick around, just take a break until, let's say, 12:04, and then we'll come back together and have a smaller group discussion.